10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 438. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome in to the first episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast in 2025. Hope you all had a fantastic holiday season, and hopefully your year's getting off on the right foot, and hopefully we can help you get off on the right foot when it comes to jazz and playing music and improving yourself this year. So before we dive in, this year is going to be all about me being your accountability partner on the podcast. Now, the thing about this podcast is it's been going for so long. I've covered so many of the topics as far as like teaching you how things work and explaining concepts and sort of getting those concepts into your brain so that you know about them. At this point, in episode 438, I think going into the 6th or 7th year of this podcast, I think it's time for me to give you stuff to do. I think that's the most important thing, is that the people who take action and actually take some assignments and do them from week to week are really going to be the people who win this year. Ultimately, getting better at music is all about taking action on a regular and consistent basis. And I feel like that's going to be a little bit more of my role, because you can always go back through the 438 episodes and find quote unquote tutorials on just about anything. So now we're going to focus on going through and doing some stuff. And my goal is to not take over your entire practice routine, but simply from week to week give you an activity to do. That shouldn't take you very long, but if you spend a little bit of time on it every single week, it should result in some really cool growth opportunities for you. So my goal is to just be a little part of your practice routine and show you some cool stuff. Now, that being said, I also want to mention that this is basically what I do for a living. On top of making the podcast, what I do is I teach people in group formats and one-on-one lessons, and I'm basically their accountability partner, and I give them things to do. So just know that if you like this kind of experience and you go, wow, this is really having an impact on my growth as a musician, I am available for more of this. And if you want to email me at nick@nickmaynelamusic.com, we can chat about working a little bit more closely together, whether that be in the group program, the Jazz Intensive that I run with Chris Claxton, or one-on-one lessons. Either one is totally fine, but reach out, because I want to help as many people as possible this year to really achieve their goals. All right, so what are we going to do this month? Well, this month is going to be all about one of the most overlooked opportunities to learn vocabulary, in my opinion, and in particular, bebop vocabulary. A lot of people really struggle with this. Wow, bebop vocabulary is just so complicated. There's so much to learn. It's so complicated. It's so specific. But I think one of the most overlooked ways to learn bebop vocabulary in a way that actually sticks is to learn bebop melodies. Because let's think about this for a second. Bebop melodies are simply a form of a bebop solo that the composer, the player who wrote it, considered good enough to write down and give a title and put their name on. So if you think about it, it's like, whoa, there's probably actually not better vocabulary than these melodies that some of the bebop masters have written. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can harness the power of bebop melodies to learn a lot of vocabulary and sort of kickstart our process of learning the vocabulary in a way that I think will stick better than anything else. So the first thing I want to mention is that learning bebop melodies is really practical, right? Because on top of learning them as vocabulary, you also now know a bunch of tunes, which is obviously really a good thing to do because you can add to your tune list when you go out to the jam session or when you're playing the gigs. You'll know a whole bunch more tunes. And that is obviously a huge part of being a jazz musician, is just knowing a bunch of songs by heart. That's part of the jazz tradition. So on top of this being a great way to learn vocabulary that eventually you can use in all your solos, it's just extremely practical because we need to know the tunes anyway. So we might as well learn the tunes and then do a little bit of extra work with them to really supercharge that time that we spent learning the tune anyway. So the first tune that we're going to work on here this week is the great Charlie Parker composition, Au Prévave. And if you don't know that tune, just simply hit pause, go on your streaming service or whatever, and listen to this melody. Because the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to learn the entire head. And it's only 12 bars. It's over a concert F blues, which is great. But it's just a really fantastic, really well thought out melody. So that's the first assignment for this week. And if you put in 10 minutes a day or something like that, you should be able to get through that 12-bar melody and know it without ever looking at anything. So obviously, as we talked about at the end of 2024 in December, we want to use our hear, sing, play process for learning this melody. So make sure that you know what it sounds like by listening to it a bunch, and then be able to sing it, and then, and only then, try to put it on your instrument. I really do feel like that's sort of the proper order to do things. Okay, so there's assignment number 1 for you in your first week of 2025. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sort of supercharge our ability by taking the first phrase and we're going to work on it in a couple of keys. Okay, so the first phrase of Au Prévave sounds like this. Just that little bit. Listen to it again. It's got some really cool elements to it. A lot of chromaticism, a lot of chord tone centered chromaticism. And it's just a really, really cool phrase that sort of sticks in your ears. Be-da-dee-dot, be-da-dee-dot, ba-ba-doo-dee-doo-ba-doo-dee-dot. And we're going to take that and we're going to manipulate it through a couple of different keys. Now, eventually, what I'm going to do is, well, not eventually, I'm going to give the Patreon members this week some tools for working on this in all 12 keys. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn it in whole steps. So we'll play it in first the key of concert F. Then what we'll do is we'll take it and we'll move it up a whole step to the key of concert G. And then we'll just keep going up in whole steps. But here's the thing. A lot of people listening to this are at a lot of different skill levels. So if you're somebody that can move things sort of freely through 12 keys because you've done a lot of that work, go ahead and use all the resources that I'm giving you to go ahead and play with me through all 12 keys in whole steps, which will comprise of 2 sets of 6 keys each. Because if we're going up in whole steps, we run back into the key we started in after 6 keys, okay? But if you are somebody that's maybe just getting started on 12 key work, maybe you've never done anything like that before, be happy if you literally get through 2 keys this week. Don't think that because you've always heard, oh, geez, well, jazz involves a lot of 12 key work. I've got to take like everything I play and I've got to move it through all 12 keys. Well, yeah, eventually that might be true, right? We should probably be able to bring a whole bunch of stuff through all 12 keys. But you know what you need to do before you worry about playing in all 12 keys? You need to worry about playing in 2 keys, taking something that is in a key that you learned it in and putting it in literally one more key. Because that process of taking something in the key of F and putting it in G, you're going to use the same resources to put it in every other key, right? Now, obviously, some keys are harder than others on whatever instrument we play, or mentally, it's just, we're less familiar with certain keys than we are with others, but it's the same process. You're just going to take that process and you're going to move it through all the keys. So if you've never done this before and this is highly intimidating to you, shoot for 2 keys this week, literally. You want to learn the whole melody and then try to take that first phrase and put it into 2 keys, and then consider that a huge win if you've never done this before. Now, you could be anywhere in between, right? I've done some stuff in 12 keys before, but it was really, really hard, and I don't think I'm going to have enough time to do that this week. Okay, well, do 3 keys, do 4 keys, do 5 keys, and anywhere in between is like totally fine. So don't think it's all 12 or bust. You can literally do as many as you can get through. And that would be just a really fantastic exercise for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the Patreon members some play along tracks and some backing tracks that will take you through all 12 keys in whole steps. And those play along tracks will help you to just sort of like test yourself. If you're going to be really hardcore about this, I want to be able to get through all 12 keys in a week, and I want to have some accountability. Those play along tracks will be the accountability just to make sure that you can get through it without stopping. All right. Now, if you're new to the show, in this first week of 2025, you've heard me mention Patreon a couple of times. That's how we support ourselves. That's why this podcast keeps going and is on episode 438, is from the generous monthly contributions from our listeners. So we don't do any ads on the show. Instead, we just rely on the people that listen to the show and want the materials to help them get further along with jazz to support us. And we do that in the form of a small monthly donation, and we do that on the Patreon platform. So if you want to know more information about that, get instant access to all of those accountability materials from this episode and just an absolute ton of materials from every episode that we've ever done, you can go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, or you can simply go to patreon.com and you can search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast, and you should be able to get yourself signed up and get all that stuff. Shout out to some new members, fresh for 2025. Thank you to Eric, Tan, Martin, and John for joining up. I hope this is your best year ever. And remember, on top of the Patreon subscription, I am also available for a lot of different ways of helping you that are a little bit more personal, a little bit more in depth. So if you're looking for something more this year, please reach out to me, nick@nickmanellamusic.com, and we can discuss options to make sure you're getting everything you need and never worry about getting stuck and not having anybody there to ask questions or help you along the way. All right. Happy New Year, everybody. We will see you next week. Make sure you get this stuff done, and we will continue on the next one. Have a good weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye.